We've got big news. Men at the Movies has a store. That's right. You can go to menatthemovies.com/merch. Get all the newest Men at the Movies swag. We've got t-shirts. We've got hats. We even have a mug if you want to drink your confined space coffee. Podcast listeners can get 10% off at either place, confinedspacecoffee.com or at the Men at the Movies store by entering code MATM at checkout. Coming up on the Men at the Movies podcast, I talk with Miles Spencer about Lawrence of Arabia. In Lawrence, we see a man whose chief character, whose chief skill and talent is his resilience, his ability to do painful and difficult things simply because those things must be done. Which begs the question, how can we develop that skill of our own? How can we become more resilient? And how can we adventure with purpose? So join us as we discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being.
Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me today, I have a very special guest, Miles Spencer. Hey, Miles, how you doing today?
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me aboard.
Really excited to have this conversation. As you mentioned, as we were talking about before, your team kind of reached out to me when some keywords popped up and said, "Hey, we think Miles would be a good guy to have." And as we've exchanged emails over the time, I think we both felt the same way that we'd have a interesting conversation about one of your favorite movies, Lawrence of Arabia. So, kicking right into it, what is it about this movie? Because you said, how often do you watch this movie, you said?
I have to admit, I probably watch it 3 or 4 times a year.
Which is no small investment. It's not quite 4 hours long, so it's you almost spend a whole day, a work day. So what is it about this movie that, that draws you in and pulls you into it 3 or 4 times a year?
Well, let me start with one thing that I'm actually sad about. I never saw it in a full-on theater, which obviously when it was originally released, that was the only way to do it. My TV is kind of big, but frankly, it's like wallpaper in my life. Yeah. It's back. Oh, let's watch this scene. Let's watch that one. So I will admit I don't sit in rapt attention of every detail, but I pick up different things along the way. But I've never had the experience of seeing it in the theater. And just as you were talking about it, I realized that was the case. So this movie is an epic example of how storytelling can entertain first and leave people with a better understanding of history almost by surprise at the end. And we can debate little scenes and little bits of whether he actually asked for lemonade at the bar in Cairo or not. But the reality is I've been through those sands. I've been through those deserts. I've been on those camels, and lemonade really sounds good. So David Lean was a hell of a storyteller. And through that story, I think we understand a little bit more about history, and that was motivation for Wells and I to do the same. We're not historians. We're storytellers. And so through entertaining people, we hope that they'll understand a little bit more about the region and the history.
All right. So you to me that you opened up a little sidetrack, a little shortcut away from the movie, because you mentioned being in the sands and being out there. So what is it? What is it that you did? And then kind of, I want you to talk about the story that came out of as a result of that time.
I was trying to piece together what had happened at 9/11, right? And that's pretty difficult for a Midwestern boy from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, sitting and trying to figure out why I always had a very curious mind. And I read a book called 7 Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence, on which basically the movie is based. And as would happen, the universe has a plan, right? Wells, my eventual co-author and frequent co-adventurer, was coming through town. Say, hey, what are you reading? I said, 7 Pillars. He said, oh, wow, I just finished that. So what do you think? It's like, I don't know. What do you think? I said, well, he certainly had his finger on the pulse of the people of the Middle East in a way that no Westerner really has before or since. So what should we do next? It's like, let's go.
Wow.
So Wells and I retraced the steps of T.E. Lawrence in 7 Pillars and in Lawrence of Arabia, trekking on foot and camel and horse 1,100 miles through the deserts of Saudi, Jordan, and Syria, eventually making it to Damascus, as Faisal did in the movie, and then returning through Jerusalem. And so it was about 26 days, and we crossed 31 times at borders and checkpoints.
Wow.
And all of these on foot, which is not a way that most Americans arrive at checkpoints in the Middle East. But we got this very unique opportunity to experience the people and the culture and the cuisine and the religions and the geography of the region. And it was that we brought back to the U.S. and eventually, after October 7th, decided, okay, it's time to publish this book. So it is historical fiction, but it deals with both 2006 and 1918. And the reason it's historical fiction is we use a time machine to get back and forth. And so, as far as you know, we don't have one.
As far as we know. So I would imagine as you would rewatch the movie that internally you are physically, maybe not physically or literally, but in many ways you're probably transported back to your own experience in the desert.
Yeah, there's a scene at a well at the beginning where Lawrence first meets his counterpart, played by Omar Sharif. And he was a Hawitat, which is a Bedouin tribe. He eventually meets Abu Tayyid, who's a different Bedouin. And that's part of the story, which they did a great job in Lawrence of. He was basically a cartographer, a bit of a intelligence gatherer on behalf of British, but he was the one that was appointed to find a tribe that could help unseat the Ottomans in the region. And they were most concerned about, obviously, Cairo, or where the British had a major presence, the Suez Canal, which has major strategic geopolitical import, and Palestine all the way up to the Levant. So that was their primary focus. They were not particularly focused on Saudi Arabia or Mesopotamia. At the time, it wasn't Saudi Arabia. It was the Hijaz and 100 other tribes in that region. So most of it was this sliver right along the eastern edge of the Mediterranean that had a tremendous amount of British import. The oil came later, but there were some inklings.
As you entered into that culture and that environment with you and what was your partner's name? Wells. I knew it was a W. I just couldn't grab it. With you and Wells, what was one of the most surprising things from that experience?
I understand this podcast is only 45 minutes. I could go on and on with our list of surprises. But I'm going to jump right in on the first one, which would be, Yeah, I left off our story where Wells and I had read this book, and we had watched the movie as well. And let's go, right? Well, that's not it. So you just don't show up in Saudi Arabia. We were lucky enough to get an invitation to speak about a book that I had published about business. And so we showed up at YPO, that's Young Presidents Organization in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I guess I did an okay job presenting the book because they said, great, what else do you want? And Wells and I said, oh, actually, we'd like to trek 1,100 miles through the deserts of Saudi, Jordan, and Syria and retrace the steps of T.E. Lawrence. So my first surprise was their answer. Cool. How can we help? Right. So imagine, Paul, just a few weeks ago, our perspective had been, why had some people from over there decided that they had to knock down 2 buildings in New York City and make, the statement of terrorism, to having Saudis say, we're so glad you're here. We're so glad you get to learn in person from us, about us, and how can we help? It was 180 in terms of our understanding and our belief, which the second surprise was how humbling it was to realize that the things that we had grown up with, Wells and I were both raised Christian, met in church, as a matter of fact. And so that was the story from the desert. And those were the prophets. And those were our prophets, actually. We were in a place, chapter 6 of the book, called Maghar al-Shib. It's in Saudi. It's an ancient archaeological dig there. And our guide was saying, he's talking about the story of Mushi and Hagar and Ezra and Ibrahim. And those sound familiar. It's like, where are you getting this? He said, I'm getting it from the Quran. It's like, well, no, this is from the Bible. So on a whim, I call up my friend in Tel Aviv, who's a Talmudic scholar, and I said, look, I'm going to name 12 likely suspects. You tell me which ones of them are in your book. We went 12 for 12. And we kind of had this epiphany on the spot where it's like, wow, the stories of the desert, the prophets of the desert, the religions of the desert have many more similarities than they have differences. And that was a profound realization for both the characters in the book, but also in real life for Wells and I. And I don't really think that Lawrence of Arabia, the movie, draws too much of that out. You could see it in the backgrounds. You could see it in the different cultures. But I don't think that was the objective of Lawrence of Arabia. But it was certainly something that shocked us.
Focusing back on the movie, because the movie was your sort of the inspiration for heading out to the Middle East there. And this movie, won Academy Awards. It inspired filmmakers. Steven Spielberg became a filmmaker because of watching this movie. These sorts of stories, as you mentioned, 45 minutes is much too short a time to discuss everything that we could kind of take away from this story, and as with all really good stories. But when you think of it, one of the key takeaways that you had mentioned earlier was this idea of resilience. And so why does resilience sort of speak to you so much, or how do you see that in this movie revealed?
Well, I think it's a great point, and I believe it is the very opening scene in which Peter O'Toole is playing Lawrence, and there's a match lit, and he holds his hand over it. He doesn't put it out with his finger, and so the question was, does it hurt? It's like, that's not the question. The question is, does it matter?
Mm-hmm.
Here is William Potter with my newspaper. Hey, Athos.
Thanks. Would you care if I one of Corporal Hartley's cigarettes?
Tom. Is it there?
Of course. Headlines. But I bet it isn't mentioned in the Times. Bedouin tribes attack Turkish stronghold. And I bet that no one in this whole headquarters even knows it happened. Or would care if you did. Allow me to ignite your cigarette.
Sir? Mr. Lawrence?
Yes?
Flimsy, sir.
Thank you.
You do that once too often. It's only flesh and blood.
Michael George Hartley. You're a philosopher.
And you're balmy. Oh! It damn well hurts.
Certainly it hurts.
Well, what's the trick then?
The trick, William Potter, is not minding that it hurts.
And so I think Lawrence is one of the great Stoic person. Stoicism has, is having its moment in the sun now. Well deserved. And Wells and I believe in those principles and try to practice them well. So mind over matter is something that Lawrence conquered, and they show it time and time again in the book. I mean, the match was just table stakes, right? I mean, going through El Hul, which is a desert that Wells and I have been through, we experienced a top temperature of 129 Fahrenheit. And Lawrence lost one or two of his guides while traversing that with the rest of the army. Yeah. And he goes back to find them, right? So exhibit A for the prosecution that, this guy's one of the great Stoics of all time. B is after that, through the desert, they attack Aqaba because all the guns are facing towards the sea for a sea attack, and they come from the back. Great scene again in the movie as well. And they win. This is the first time the Arab revolt has marked any victory against the Turks. And so after riding through desert, after getting to Aqaba and winning the battle, after stacking the bodies in the moonlight, he rides to Cairo on a camel, right?
Yeah.
She shows up again, orders the lemonade. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I mean, it was one of the great camel rides of all time, which, I mean, for him, it's just like, again, yes. Third one was when he was captured and abused in a border town called Dera, between what's now Jordan and Syria. We did go to that town. And he was, I will gloss over and say that he was abused. Yeah. By his own self-reporting, in the book and in the movie. He was roughed up pretty good. But then the next day he was in Jerusalem with Allenby, because that's what you do. And so when it comes to mind over matter, I wish I could be like this 5'4", blonde-haired, blue-eyed Englishman that doesn't look like much probably on a rugby pitch, but wow. He was one of the great Stoics of all time.
Part of what we do with our podcast is look at these scenes from the movies and the stuff that resonates with us. And say, okay, how can we embrace that? How can we apply that to our lives? How can we practice what we see, those themes that kind of bring our hearts to life? So what are some ways, in your experience, as you mentioned, like we're not at that level where we're putting out matches or riding across the desert or riding back into the desert because a dude fell off his camel, or saying, no, we're going to get to Cairo, straight through another desert. And so how do we, in our American Western world, how can we develop that sort of resilience and that mindset of it's not that it doesn't hurt, it's not minding that it does?
Right. Well, you call it resilience. I'm going to go with mind over matter. And again, as I mentioned, Wells and I met in church, and that particular version of Christianity believed in mind over matter. It believed that there was a spiritual soul and there was a material body, and we are souls in a material body here for a finite amount of time on Earth, right? In terms of our material portion of us, but our souls and our spirits remain. And that's the only thing that's important. And that can't be damaged by flame or by abuse or by, frankly, anything if you don't let it. So today, Wells and I do physical things that test that mind over matter. We're in the ice baths at 44 degrees and we're hiking at 14,000 feet under the moonlight, and we're diving 100 feet down to shipwrecks and hanging out with sharks and things like that. But in reality, there's things that happen to me just today that I choose not to dramatize, not to get upset about, and do my best towards that challenge each day. That could be a physical challenge. That could be a financial challenge. That could be I'm a parent of two kids, 13 and 11, right? Like there's challenges there too.
Yeah, for sure.
And that flame burns. But the question is whether I let it burn me. And so I do think that there are more than a handful of things that happen to many of us every day that you can take a stoic approach and not let it knock you off your game and keep the goal in mind and keep marching onward. Lawrence certainly did. And the movie did a great job of showing it.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the things that I took away. Like that, as you mentioned, that scene there in the very beginning set the tone for who Lawrence was and everything. Like you saw it. And that's what makes a great story is it shows, doesn't tell you. So it's showing you the kind of man, the stoicism, the mind over matter, the resilience. All those words summed up what you saw in that story that was told in this movie. And as you said, it's a little intimidating. Just like you were just saying, climbing the 14,000 feet or diving or trekking through the desert, that probably wasn't your first foray into this stuff, right? You probably have had you worked your way up to get to that level, or did you just dive in?
I'm going to go with I worked my way up. I didn't really think I was all that unique. I was just doing what I was doing. And then gradually people started shaking their heads and say, like, you did? The book starts off with the scenes relatively short. It's a prologue. It's in a place called San Fermin, which is in Pamplona. And sure enough, it's Magnus and Finn running with the bulls. And they decide, look, there's two parts of San Fermin. There's a place where the rookies go because it's straight and it's easy and you don't fall down. And it leads right into the stadium where there's 25,000 people cheering for you at 8:30 in the morning. Most of them drunk. But the problem with that is they're rookies and they tend to look back and look forward and trip over each other. So the bulls aren't as dangerous as the runners are. Right? Wells and I and the characters, Magnus and Finn, all both decided independently that that's not where they wanted to be. They wanted to be with the pros who had more elbow room. and were willing to risk the fact that the bulls were faster and that there were 2 turns that had to be negotiated in a short period of time. One of them is called Dead Man's Turn. I'm not sure why. But look, these are things that me and my co-author Wells have experienced ourselves. And so they make for great stories, but they also make for great character development of Magnus and Finn in what they're willing to do on an everyday basis in order to gain. This is important, and perhaps this is a tie back to the book as well. I don't know that Lawrence was just out there thrill riding, having an adventure, but he definitely had an adventuresome streak in him. And he didn't just do adventures so he could talk about them and write about them in a book. He did adventures with a purpose. And Wells and I really look for opportunities to not just have an adventure, but to have a purpose where we can tell a story and others can learn about the culture and the civilization and the history of the places that we go and have these adventures. So it's not just about, oh, I climbed Everest, check the box, personal best, I'm not discounting that.
Right.
I haven't done it. I've been I've been higher than 20, but I've not been to 27,000. But there's no story to tell, and there's no purpose. We really wanted to emerge with a purpose that in telling our story, others would learn. And I absolutely think both Lawrence with 7 Pillars and Lawrence in the movie had a purpose to his adventure.
Right. You touched on this idea of adventure for a purpose, but also that idea not just for your characters, but for you and Wells, of you doing the adventure with the idea of character development. And I remember, I think it was a Patagonia documentary where they talked about these guys who would do Everest, but they would sort of do it the easy way, where they would just like pay for everything to get done, so everything was made. And the guys in the documentary, the quote was, they were assholes when they left. They were assholes when they got back. They could check that box, but they didn't undergo that character development that such an endeavor was intended. And what I appreciated in this movie is Lawrence goes, he did what the Bedouins did. He did what they did. He ate what they ate. He drank what they drank. He rode the way they rode. He ended up dressing the way they dressed. And he wasn't, like, you didn't see that with the other British officers in this story. And I guess the other idea sort of that's rumbling around in my head is another quote. When you brought up the bulls, and it was this guy said, I always thought I wanted to be a matador until I was in the ring with a bull charging me. And I realized what I really wanted was to wear tight pants and have thousands of people cheering my name.
That sounds like Freddie Mercury from Queen. Yeah, I think that, look, Lawrence probably didn't do it solely for character development, but he developed quite a character as a result of the things and the choices that he made. And I think in today's world, in which we can get tons of dopamine just by going there and having these virtual adventures, or even having a adventure in which all of the edges are rounded off and polished, I think doesn't get you. It's perfectly fine. It's better than nothing, but it doesn't give you the depth and the breadth that you would get alone, exposed, and vulnerable.
Yeah, I took my boys to this in-city country club where it was, I live in Charlotte, which is rather an urban-ish area. And we live in the middle of a bunch of golf clubs we can't play at because they're all super private and all this stuff. So we went, it's like 10 minutes away and there's all these golf simulators and you're in there. And I'm like, man, this is kind of nice. I could play golf anytime, no matter the weather. And as me and my boys are hitting the ball around, I was like, this looks like golf because, it's high def. It's, you're swinging a golf club. It feels like golf. But we walked out, you're like, that wasn't quite it. That wasn't, we weren't outside. We weren't walking. It was, as you said, too polished, too comfortable. You mentioned that it's so easy to get wrapped up in the phone, in the comfortable lifestyle, in the, you don't want to stretch. Everybody's talking about safety and comfort these days.
Yeah.
And Lawrence never embraced the safety aspect of that was not his chief pursuit. And obviously, just from the little bit of stories that you've told, safety probably ranks around 5 or 6 maybe for you, if it's that high.
Well, I think that might be an outward perception, at least speaking from personal experience. So, look, I'm an entrepreneur, and that involves risk. But what people don't see is the risk mitigation underneath that is in the form of a plan and research. And likewise, on our trips, we were trained by security, kidnap, and ransom specialists that put us through the ringer in terms of personal safety and country, right? So we felt like we went in well-trained, well-aware, and that enabled us to see and to experience things with a degree of comfort that didn't have the anxiety and the trepidation of not being trained. So I hate to take issue, but I think safety is table stakes. You gotta do that before you can do something like this. So it may appear as if safety wasn't a concern, but yeah, I'd put it up there pretty much number 1 or number 1.5 for sure. It allowed us to experience the world in a much better way. I think for Lawrence, the way I see him in the movie and in the books, remember Lawrence was born out of wedlock, a different name than his father. He always felt quite the outsider. He was brilliant. So he had a bit of a chip on his shoulder from the get-go. He seemed, at least in the movie, to have a flair for the masochistic. Wells and I are just not that way. We're willing to endure, but not for no reason. And sometimes it appeared as if Lawrence had a death wish. So none of that here. But wow, it made for a complex and exciting character.
Yeah. Complex character is definitely how I would describe Lawrence, as he, both as you said, fighting for his place, even in the beginning of the movie where he feels like he's wasted. He sees stuff that's going on in the world and he's frustrated, feeling like he's extraordinary, right? That was a word that came up later in the movie when he was talking to Allenby, was he knows that he has a purpose. He has a calling. He has a talent. But then as you had mentioned in your notes, he sort of, in one point, went to hubris, where he believed he was touched by God, nothing could touch him. And then when something did, as you had said earlier, he ends up back in Jerusalem a day later saying, I want an ordinary job. I want a safe job. I want to be protected. And I thought it was interesting when you were talking about the safety preparation for your journey. of, and maybe safety wasn't the right word, but there is a certain embracing of risk and uncertainty where you can, like, even in that preparation, against the kidnapping and ransom course that you went through, you're like, we went through the ringer. Even the preparation, right, wasn't easy for something, but you don't know, 31 checkpoints is 31 opportunities for something to go sideways, especially for Americans coming through in those places. And so, being comfortable with that takes practice. It takes timing, or it takes time and reps. Just like, you can't go into this, play in the Super Bowl without, the preparation for the Super Bowl starts in August. And sometimes that's August, a couple seasons before you actually get there. And living in Charlotte with the Panthers, it's going to be several seasons before we ever see a Super Bowl. So Miles, I did want to sort of touch on one last thing. This idea, again, the word I'm using is resilience, but there's sort of two ideas that are bouncing around in my head. You had talked about earlier about the three main religions having more similarities than differences. And also we had discussed earlier that the idea that resilience requires faith. And you had said some really good comments that I was like, man, I want to capture those concepts on tape, if we had tape, on digital tape. So when you think of those two concepts, what comes out for you that I think maybe helps guide you, just from the short time that we've gotten to talk, of, like you had mentioned, the belief that there is something bigger, right?
Yeah, my point of view in terms of spirituality is like, I often say the universe has a plan, and sometimes that plan is not revealed entirely until later. But it's absolute hubris to think that we control the universe or any little aspect of the universe. There's so much that is not within our control. And there's very little that is within our control, and things that we can improve in ourselves, and also choose how we react to things, as Lawrence chose not to react to the match lit underneath his finger. So I believe that, I'm just a very, very small speck in this universe, and being given the opportunity, or being available to the opportunity, to experience these adventures with a purpose that we can share with others, is just a real gift that I'm grateful for every day. And I'll let the universe reveal what it's got for me on a day-to-day basis, and then do my best within that. It's like, take the situation as it is, and do your best, and not worry about tomorrow. And frankly, can't worry about yesterday, because you're not going to change it.
Yeah, that's some rich stuff. That we can apply, not just for the big adventures that we think about, that we plan, that we put so much effort and time into, but that everyday adventure of life, as we look for how that plan is being revealed to us, and what's our role in it. And, even again, thinking back to how you prepared for your trip, you just didn't show up. Like, there was a lot of preparation and effort and, even discipline physically to prepare yourself for those trips. And so I think my last question for you is, you had mentioned that idea of adventuring with a purpose. So when you do this, whether the adventure is parenting your kids, starting a business, or going on some trek adventure, epic adventure kind of thing, what is Like, what is the purpose that drives you?
I think that I subscribe to a mission for myself that's, my purpose in life. I worked on this through another 7, instead of 7 pillars of wisdom. It's 7 habits of highly effective people by Stephen Covey.
Mm-hmm.
And my mission is fairly simple. Just strength and honor, pure fun in the moment, gratitude and grace, and pursuit of the way. So that's a bunch of little phrases that actually trigger me to do things with not just strength, but with honor. Recognize that there's pure fun in the moment. Don't always be worrying about the past or the future. Do it with gratitude and grace. It's nothing better than making a list of things that you're grateful for, or expressing just one thing that you're grateful for at dinner or elsewhere. And then pursuit of the way is really, look, it sounds like a path. It sounds like a march. But what it really is from is another book called Flow from Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And there is always a way that is optimal. If you feel anxious, it's perhaps because the challenge exceeds your ability. If you feel bored, it's probably because your ability exceeds the challenge. But if you can find high challenge opportunities that you can meet with highly honed ability, that's flow, and that is the way.
And where did you come up with your principles, those little sort of core foundational things that drive you?
I read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey probably 25, 30 years ago. And when I read it, I realized, gosh, I was doing most of these things myself. It's just he put good labels on them and good structure to it.
Yeah.
It's great. Now I have a grid. He used to sell like a 3-ring binder and stuff like that. But that is a finely chiseled piece of rock that was pretty gangly 25 years ago. And I have chipped it down to a couple of words that really, I know what I'm talking about when I read that to myself.
Yeah.
And when I plan my week or plan my day, I look at it and ask myself, what can I do towards this goal today?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a good action item for anybody who's listening, is to take those ideas, sort of, as you said, to take the broad base, and over the years and decades, chisel that away until you've got those foundational stones of, this is what drives me. This is what stabilizes me, what centers me, and gives you your purpose. Basically, it's like, oh, when the world feels chaotic, when stuff's going sideways, when your kids are driving you nuts, those foundational stones help you get through that. And I think, tying it back to the beginning, that's the mind over matter. When we remember those things in the moment, that the externals may be pounding in that's not true. I think those help us to maintain our stability and move forward.
We certainly do.
So, Miles, thank you very much for your time and for sharing this movie, sharing your passion for this movie. If people want to know more about you or read your book or books, what would be the best place for them to go to find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
Well, certainly for the book, it's available on Amazon in both Kindle, electronic, paper book, and I'll put in a plug for the Audible, which is read by Eduardo Bertolini. It's a beautiful narration of the same words. I mean, we wrote the words, but when I hear them from Eduardo, they're like, wow, that's much better. So I highly recommend the Audible. Personally, that's my favorite. I also have a blog of my attempts to solve the problems of the world each day. That's milesspencer.com. So that's mostly where you can find me.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Anything else you'd like to close or add before I wrap up?
No, it's a wonderful honor to be on your show, talk about a movie that has profoundly affected my life. And I'm glad that other people share a passion, not just for that, but for movies as well.
Yeah. Well, once again, thank you for your time and for joining us. And this has been a great conversation for me to have. It's helped me even as I'm sitting here. I already can't wait to get back and edit it and re-listen to it and be like, oh yeah, that's so good. So this has been Paul McDonald and Miles Spencer talking about Lawrence of Arabia. Check out the movie. Check out Miles in his website or read his book. I think it would be a fascinating experience for you. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?